The morning sun hit the parade grounds like a spotlight, washing over the rows of uniforms standing sharply in formation. A quiet buzz rolled through the base, not loud enough to be obvious, but just enough to tell anyone paying attention that something unusual was happening. And, as always, the voice of United War welcomes the viewer with a promise of a story that starts quietly and ends in a way no one expects. The camera of the mind settles on the center of the grounds, where Major General Collier, a man known for his rigid attitude and zero tolerance for mistakes, walked with his hands behind his back. Every step was measured, every glance sharp enough to cut through steel. Soldiers straightened automatically when he passed. To them, he was the embodiment of discipline itself. But today, Collier's attention wasn't on the formation. It was on her. A newcomer stood near the edge of the grounds, quiet, unassuming, hands tucked behind her. She wore a standard Navy uniform, nothing fancy, nothing out of place, yet something about her presence made a few soldiers exchange curious looks. They didn't know her name. They had only been—
General Collier didn't move at first. He only narrowed his eyes, as if trying to read her like a classified file he suddenly wished he had reviewed more thoroughly. The soldiers nearby stayed painfully still, sensing the tension forming between them. No one dared breathe too loudly, let alone speak. But she didn't back down. Her posture remained steady, calm, disciplined, absolutely unmoved. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't arrogance. It was something far more unsettling to a man who prided himself on control: confidence. Collier stepped closer, boots hitting the concrete with deliberate weight. "You don't seem to understand," he said. "That gesture is earned. It is not performed lightly, and certainly not by someone who hasn't endured what those men endured." Still silence. Her face didn't flinch, didn't twitch, didn't even blink in discomfort. Instead, her eyes held his with an unsettling steadiness, polite but unwavering. Collier inhaled slowly, almost theatrically, and raised his voice so everyone within 30 yards could hear him. "For clarity," he announced, "the gesture you just made is exclusive to SEALs. Only men and women who have bled for that insignia are allowed to use it." He let the words hang in the air like a warning flare. A few soldiers quietly nodded, some even smirked, assuming she had just publicly failed. A newcomer making a fool of herself. It was a harmless story for them, something to laugh about at lunch. But then, she stepped forward. Not aggressively, not with any kind of dramatic flair, just one small step, graceful and unhurried, like someone who had spent a lifetime walking into danger with poise instead of panic. And she looked the general directly in the eyes. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, yet somehow it carried across the grounds like it had been carved into the wind itself. "General, I'm fully aware of what that gesture means." Collier's jaw flexed. He was waiting, no, expecting an apology, an explanation, something to give him back the control he felt slipping between his fingers. Instead, she lifted her right hand. Slowly, deliberately, with the same precision she had used earlier, and before the general could say another word, she flashed it again. But this time, it wasn't a mimic, it wasn't amateurish, it wasn't the gesture of someone who didn't know what they were doing. It was perfect. So perfect, in fact, that the older SEALs watching stiffened immediately. A few of them exchanged confused looks, their brows furrowed deeply. Someone in the back whispered, "No way. No way she knows that version." The version she had just performed wasn't the public-facing gesture, the one occasionally shown in recruitment ads or Hollywood interpretations. No, it was the internal one, the one only SEALs used when they were talking to each other behind closed doors, the one reserved for those who had served on missions so classified that even their badges didn't tell the full story. General Collier froze like a statue. He recognized it instantly. It was impossible not to. A hush fell over the entire courtyard, quiet, heavy, almost suffocating. Even the wind seemed to die. She slowly lowered her hand and returned it calmly behind her back, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened at all. Collier's voice came out strained. "Who exactly are you?" She didn't move, didn't even shift her expression, but the air around her felt different, charged, electric, dangerous. For the first time, the soldiers realized something that should have been obvious. She wasn't nervous. He was. Because that gesture, the perfect one, could only mean one thing. She didn't just know it. She earned it.
The conference room that had once been buzzing with voices was now uncomfortably quiet. As the general processed what he had just witnessed, every officer, aide, and enlisted member watched him closely. No one dared to interrupt. No one even shifted. It was as if the air itself had frozen. For the first time since arriving, the general stepped back. A subtle movement, but everyone noticed it. His eyes narrowed, not in anger this time, but in calculation. He had spent decades reading people, identifying frauds, dissecting egos. Yet the woman standing calmly before him didn't fit any category he knew. Commander Ava Hale hadn't raised her voice, she hadn't explained herself, she hadn't defended her position. She had simply returned a gesture he believed only SEALs were permitted to use, and she did it effortlessly, without hesitation, without fear. As he stood silent, an uneasy whisper spread through the room, barely audible, but impossible to stop. "Sir, she couldn't be." "No, that's impossible. SEALs don't exist on paper, especially not her." The general lifted a hand, instantly shutting everyone up. Then he turned back toward Ava. He didn't smile. He didn't challenge her again. He simply asked the one question no one expected. "Where did you learn it?" Ava didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room, at the rows of officers who had spent the morning minimizing her, at the staffers who treated her like an administrative inconvenience, and finally at the general who had arrogantly stated she couldn't possibly belong. She took a slow breath, and then she replied with calm precision. "I didn't learn it, sir. I earned it." A ripple moved through the room. Shock, disbelief, curiosity. Only one word from her sentence truly mattered. Earned. The general's jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed almost human. No rank, no medals, no authority. Just a man trying to process a truth he should have recognized from the start. He motioned toward the seats and spoke again. "Everyone out. Now." The command struck like thunder. Chairs scraped in a panic. Papers were gathered. Nobody questioned it. Within seconds, the room was empty. Everyone fleeing except the general and Ava. The door clicked shut. And now the truth could finally begin. The general exhaled slowly and sat down across from her, on equal ground, something he had never done for anyone that morning. "Commander Hale," he began, voice much quieter than before, "I need to know exactly who you are." Ava didn't move. She didn't blink. Her presence was steady, unshakable. "Sir," she said, "I am here under direct orders. You were not cleared for the details." The general rubbed his forehead. Clearance, orders, compartmentalized files. He understood what those words meant, and suddenly he wasn't angry. He was worried. "Are you telling me that this briefing falls under Tier 1 restrictions?" Ava didn't confirm. She didn't deny. She simply said, "Some operations require silence, sir." This time, the general swallowed, hard. Because only one community in the entire U.S. military lived in that kind of silence. Black tier units. The teams that were so covert, so deeply buried beneath layers of classification that even commanders with stars on their shoulders rarely knew they existed. If she was part of one of those teams, then outranking him wasn't just possible. It meant she had operated in places he didn't even have maps for. The general leaned back, eyes slowly widening. "So that gesture," he whispered, "wasn't imitation." Ava shook her head once. "It was respect. For those I served with." The room grew colder, heavier. And suddenly, the morning's insults, mockery, and disbelief echoed in the general's mind like thunder pounding against metal. He had treated her like a junior officer. He had dismissed her credentials. He had corrected her, belittled her, challenged her, all while she had remained calm, because she knew something he did not. She didn't need his validation. She had already earned something far greater than his approval. Finally, the general asked the question he had been avoiding since she returned her gesture. "How many deployments?" Ava paused. Not because she hesitated, but because counting them felt unnecessary. "Enough," she said quietly, "to know when a room full of leaders has forgotten what leadership looks like." The general's face dropped. It wasn't an insult. It was the truest statement he had heard all year. He took a breath, deeper than any before it, and finally said 3 words no one thought a general would ever speak to someone he believed outranked him. "Commander, I apologize." Ava nodded gently, not triumphant, not smug, not superior, simply accepting a long overdue truth. But the moment wasn't over yet. The general stood, walked to the door, and placed his hand on the handle. Then he looked back at her. "I need your help, and this time we do it your way." And for the first time all day, Commander Ava Hale smiled, not because she had won, but because the mission could finally begin. The hallway outside the briefing room was silent as the general held the door half open. Officers waited nervously down the corridor, pretending to check tablets or reorganize clipboards, though every one of them was actually waiting to see what would happen next. But the general didn't call them back. Instead, he looked at Ava with the seriousness he had not shown the entire day. "Commander," he said quietly, "what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room." Ava steps forward, hands behind her back, posture sharp and confident. "Understood, sir." The door closed with a soft, definitive click. Inside the now dimmed conference room, the general walked toward the large wall-mounted screen. He tapped a code, a series of digits far longer and more complex than standard access, and the system switched from the training agenda to a black screen with a single line of text. Classified. Tier 1 access required. Ava's expression did not change. The general noticed. "You're not surprised," he muttered. "I was sent here for a reason," she replied simply. The general's shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight of what he was carrying finally became visible. He turned toward her. 3 days ago, we lost contact with an entire reconnaissance team in a restricted zone overseas." He paused. "They were last heard reporting an unknown hostile presence, equipment far too advanced for local forces, movements that didn't match any militant groups we track. This was no ordinary reconnaissance team. They were some of our best, and they sent one last burst transmission before going dark." He reached for a file folder thick with papers and slid it across the table. Ava opened it. Inside were images, blurred, grainy, chaotic, but she understood everything instantly. The shapes in the photos, the patterns on the ground, the tactical positioning. She had seen similar signs before. Signs of a unit that wasn't supposed to exist. Signs of operators whose allegiance was unknown. "Sir," Ava said quietly, "this wasn't an ambush. This was extraction." The general stared at her. "You knew who did this?"
No, Ava replied, closing the folder. But I know the pattern, and whoever they are, they're operating at a level even your teams aren't trained to detect. The general let out a long breath, one he had clearly been holding for days. That, he admitted, is why you were called. He walked around the table and stood directly across from her. There's no record of your deployments, no details of your assignments, but I've been doing this long enough to know silence always means significance. Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. The general continued. You've dealt with units like this before, units that don't answer to any flag, teams that move without identification, without jurisdiction, without trace. He leaned forward, voice low. If anyone can locate the missing team, it's you. For several seconds, the room was completely quiet. Finally, Ava spoke. Who else knows? Only a handful, he replied. Even most of my own command staff aren't cleared. And before you ask, no, the missing team's families don't know yet. We don't announce casualties until we're certain. Ava nodded slightly. Good, then we still have time. The general blinked. You think they're alive? Ava closed the file slowly. I don't think, sir. I know. Her voice carried something the general had not felt from anyone all week. Absolute certainty. It was the same calm certainty she had shown when she returned the seal gesture. The same calm certainty she had shown when the entire room doubted her. The general straightened. Tell me what you need. Ava looked up at the screen, then back at him. I'll need your full operational control of this mission. No interference, no second guessing, no bureaucracy slowing down our movements. The general stiffened. Full control was unheard of. But after the morning's events, he trusted her more than he trusted his own staff. You'll have it. And one more thing, she added. Yes? I'll need a team. Not your best. Your most adaptable. The general nodded. He understood. Ava Hale didn't want elite soldiers who relied on rigid protocols. She wanted fighters who could shift, improvise, blend into the shadows. Operatives who could follow someone like her. I know exactly who to assign, he said. But Ava shook her head. No, sir. I will choose. The general didn't argue. He simply said, then choose. Ava picked up the folder and walked toward the door. As she reached for the handle, the general spoke one last time. Commander Hale. She paused. That gesture earlier, I shouldn't have questioned it. Ava allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. Respect is not given by hierarchy, sir. It's earned by character. The general nodded, humbled in a way no one thought possible. Ava opened the door and, instantly, every officer waiting outside scrambled to attention. Their eyes followed her with a mixture of awe and fear, whispering to themselves, trying to understand who she truly was. But they wouldn't understand. Not yet. Because Ava Hale wasn't just a commander. She wasn't just a strategist. And she wasn't just someone who returned a seal gesture. She was something far more dangerous and far more necessary. A ghost in plain sight. A leader forged in silence. A protector who operated where the map ended. The mission ahead would reveal everything. The missing team, the unknown force behind their disappearance, and the reason Ava was chosen above every ranking officer in that building. But for now, as she walked down the corridor with the classified file under her arm, one truth echoed through the entire base.